Today we are talking with scientist, inventor, and author Mike Miller. Mike, welcome to the Headroom.
I'm honored to be here, Rob. It's an excellent opportunity to get on a good show and discuss some important topics in the wonderful world of physics.
Well said. Thank you very much. You know, I was just looking at your book, and it is truly remarkable.
Thank you.
The name of this book is called Laser Propulsion, and it was co-authored by L.D. Maurer.
Yeah, Larry Maurer, my business partner and engineer.
Okay. He handles more of the engineering side of this.
Yeah, he was responsible for developing the cadmium sulfide crystal lens to be able to alter the structure of space-time in a specific way by producing a very, very powerful terawatt laser system.
Okay, so he has certainly contributed to this field. The name of the book is called Laser Propulsion, and what this is leading towards is a radical new way of propulsion for aircraft, even commercial transportation. Isn't that right?
Absolutely. We're working with a situation where we have a means of reducing the rest mass of a vehicle to basically zero, and then we require a small amount of energy to make it move, either in atmosphere or in space.
So this is really, if this works through and comes to the production stage, this will totally revolutionize the whole transportation, the whole modus of propulsion
Absolutely.
all over the world.
It's a means of traveling to the stars, to the fourth physical dimension, the fourth geometric dimension, in which movement of a few miles an hour is equivalent to millions of times the speed of light in this dimension. So we don't break any laws of physics. We travel in a higher dimension and go from one point to another virtually instantaneously.
Yeah. You know, take us through it just at the beginning, sort of thumbnail, how laser propulsion works.
Well, the basic idea comes from my analysis of Einstein's equations, which basically show that, number one, space itself can expand or move at a rate much greater than the speed of light itself. And this has to do with the Goose theory of the inflationary epoch of the universe, where it expanded at millions of times the speed of light, as an example of this type of situation. Now, what we propose to do is organize an area of space-time in front of our spacecraft, polarize the quantum mechanical vacuum, produce a mass-carrying Higgs field, and investigate the properties of space itself in such a way that we can analyze what we need to figure out to do a non-local transfer of mass from one point in space-time to another point in space-time by the very, very important point of producing a true three-dimensional field, because we know that light has an E vector and an H vector that occupy the X and Y plane, and what happens on the Z-axis is merely the vector product of the Poynting vector, which goes off in the third dimension. Now, that
okay, see, right there, Mike, hello.
Pardon?
Mike,
Yes.
you got to slow it down a little bit.
Alrighty.
Right there, you just lost, most of the people listening.
Ah, I see.
Okay, when you start talking about the X,
that in very slow pieces?
Yeah, when you talk about the X, hello, wait, hold on. When you talk about the X vector and the Y vector, I don't know what the heck you're talking about.
Ah, okay. We can go into it like this. We have three-dimensional space consists of X, Y, and Z axes, say in Cartesian coordinates. It's like looking at the...
Wait a second. Hold on. Whoa. Hold on. Wait a second. Hello. Wait a second. What kind of coordinates?
Cartesian coordinates.
Well, again, we don't know what that is.
Okay, well, these were the original method developed many hundreds of years ago for actually describing the physical properties of space.
So we don't know any of that. You're going to have to put this down. You're going to have to water this down some for us. Okay, you're going to have to Yeah, you're going to have to water this down a little bit. So you're going to have to talk. Okay, instead of giving us the specifics, give us the broad strokes. Okay, we don't want to know how everything works. We just want to know the general ideas and the general theories. What we'll do from there, once you give me the big, broad strokes, is I'll start to probe into it, and we'll start to go through the level of complexity from there. So let's start from the most blunt ideas and work our way down.
All right. The basic idea is to create a warp in space-time itself that we can travel through. We produce a warp in front of the ship, like on Star Trek with the Enterprise, and we travel through this space warp and go to a distant location in the galaxy instantaneously by going into hyperspace, which is the fourth physical dimension.
Okay. Are you actually shooting a laser out in front of the ship?
Yes, sir. This is what makes it different. It's not an action-reaction drive like a regular rocket, which shoots exhaust.
Yeah, we're familiar. Yeah, we're familiar with how a rocket works.
Yeah.
Okay. So go on. Tell us about the laser and how that works.
What the laser does is it's able to create a unique condition in space-time in front of the craft, and this unique condition is very, very similar to what happens in a rotating black hole, which is a very, very, very strong gravity field that is able to warp space and time itself. And we're producing a similar field that is able to stretch and fold and warp space and time, and in such a way that it's like folding a map of the United States. It has New York on one end and Los Angeles on the other end, a two-dimensional sheet of paper, folding it into third dimension so that the two distant points become conjoined. In other words, we're able to connect two distant regions in space-time by actually, in a manner of speaking, folding the universe in front of us, so like that piece of paper analogy, so that the 2 points come in contact.
Okay. What kind of laser do you use for this propulsion system?
This laser is a solid-state laser that consists of cadmium sulfide and a few other crystals that are described quite thoroughly in the book, and it has a unique ability of focusing energy down to a very, very, very tiny point, so we can actually produce a quantum mechanical effect and then expand that quantum mechanical effect, which effect has to do with non-locality, action at a distance, Bell's theorem, and so forth and so on.
Okay. And are you, in fact, creating a bit of a slope in which to slide down on?
Absolutely. We can consider the space-time metric to be sort of like a rubber sheet. For instance, the sun is making a dent in the rubber sheet representing the space-time metric, which has been called G mu nu by the physicists.
Okay.
And this dent in space-time that the sun is producing produces a gravity well that the Earth is traveling around in a circle around the sun, and because space itself is curved, the Earth keeps going around and around the sun. If space were not curved, the Earth would just take off in a straight line.
Okay, so what you're saying is
physical problem.
Okay, Mike. So what you're saying is that you create a gravity well in front of this craft. How are you able to manipulate it so that you can make it larger or smaller and therefore go faster or slower?
What we can do is actually transfer the mass of the spaceship forward on the field, and so a type of projection of mass, which reduces the mass of our ship to basically zero. And if you have zero mass and have energy, then you become very similar to a photon, and you must move at the speed of light.
Okay, so it sounds like you're talking about two different systems here. You've got this...
Brilliant, that's exactly correct.
Okay, you're talking about this laser that's pointing out, creating this quantum gravity well in front of you. And you're also, before you do that, you have to lower the mass of the ship down to close to zero.
Yeah.
So they're two different...
two-part system.
Two-part system, right.
Reduce the mass of the ship, or the rest mass of the ship, equivalently, so we can take advantage of certain quantum mechanical properties.
Okay.
The way we reduce the rest mass of the ship is by folding space and time. It's an analogy whereby you might understand this is that you can, say, take the pen I've got in my hand, and I can put this down on my shirt and roll the shirt up around the pen, and the pen seems to disappear. It's still there, but I can't see it. And in this case, the pen would represent the ship, having the same sort of elliptical structure to it as the whole field does, and my shirt would represent space-time. This is the principle of frame dragging that Einstein explained. It's like a black hole, for instance, will drag space and time with it in a vortex, and we want to use these frame dragging effects to actually produce a warp in space. Now, a warp in space can be produced by a very massive object, or it can be actually produced by ordinary laser light, because laser light has the ability to burn through steel. It carries energy equals mc squared, so the energy in a laser beam is organized, and it's equivalent to mass. So if it's structured and rotating in a vortex and focused to a point, its energy density can become so large that, like a black hole, a singularity, it actually rips a hole in space-time itself and forms a wormhole that the endpoint of which can be completely controlled by the magnetic properties of the electromagnetic gauge group that we're working with. The photon, the electron, and the proposed but never discovered magnetic monopoles.
Wow, you just said a mouthful right there. Okay, I'm getting an idea. Let me try and put this in different terms for people listening. What you're talking about is not just one laser, but three lasers, or you break the beam up in three different beams?
Exactly. We have three different laser beams.
Okay.
One has electric properties.
Yeah. Each having their own property, and you organize them, you manipulate them in such a way that you rotate them in such a way that has a much different effect than just one laser pointing out in space would have.
Exactly,
yeah.
Yes. What this does is, it's like, in physics we call this a phase space. We have X, Y, Z for our three-dimensional space, and we have an electric component in each of our three dimensions, a magnetic component of each of our three dimensions. That makes up two of the laser beams, the blue beam and the red beam. They carry electrical charges, and the green beam carries a form of matter which is known as excitonic matter, which is actually the fifth state of matter, which is able to actually interact directly with the vacuum of outer space when it's combined with the other two fields in a rotating manner. And some of these experiments have already been done, to show that it is possible.
Okay. By who, Mike?
Black hole phenomena and
Mike?
How light can actually travel faster than the speed of light.
Mike?
It goes around a black hole.
Mike? Who has done these experiments?
Well, this is basically observation of the black holes themselves, and the rotation of objects around them.
No. You mentioned that these experiments have been done.
Well, yeah. I'm not sure if it's actually the experiment would be described as observational data taken from the Hubble and other observational satellites, which is basically proven the existence of rotating black holes. And we know from Einstein's equations that a rotating black hole, the gravity, will actually make a vortex out of the space-time itself, and it will be rotating along with the black hole. It's like stirring a cup of coffee with your finger and dropping a coffee bean on the coffee, and the bean goes around at the same rate that the coffee is going. Now, if you push that bean, it'll with your finger, it'll go around even faster. Now, what we're saying is that if space and time is already rotating and you have an object in there, you can exceed the speed of light, because the object with reference to the moving space-time frame never goes faster than the speed of light, but to an outside observer it does. And, this explains a lot of the phenomena of black holes, why, light can't escape, and so forth and so everything is confined and focused down to a point, a singularity. And there's a lot of complex physics involved in this, where if you have too much matter and energy in one point at one time, it becomes basically too heavy for the universe to hold, and it pops out into a higher dimensional space. And this is the physics of the black hole, the physics of the Einstein-Rosen bridge or wormhole, and
yeah.
as we found black holes, we know that it is possible to form certain types of mathematical objects, that we wish to use our machine to actually demonstrate that these aren't just mathematical objects, but they can actually be produced and used for a form of travel, for producing other types of devices that I might get into a little bit later on, because you don't want to confuse the issue.
Let's go back to this method of reducing the weight of the ship and its occupants close to zero. Is this all theoretical at this point?
Possibly, yeah. It could be considered mostly theoretical, because to this date, nobody has produced a device that can do this.
Okay, so is your laser propulsion process now just theoretical itself until this component of it has been realized?
Yeah, in the sense that we were able to get patents. Our theories are sound and accepted as being a viable device, but it has yet to be produced. Now, the other part of the system has to do with the hull, our superconductive hull, in which we're able to set up conditions on the surface of the hull that actually interact with space-time itself and interact with the beam that we're projecting. What we do on the hull of the spaceship is actually fool Mother Nature into thinking that the weight of the spaceship is in front of the ship instead of on the ship, and that acts as an attractive force to drag the ship forward into the space warp that we're creating with the laser beam.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this then. Knowing what you know about what is available to mainstream science and academia, what do you feel is the likely time frame for the technology that's required for the half of your system to work, this bringing the mass down of the ship next to zero?
We're ready to build this thing right now. We've already been working with subcontractors at University of Chicago and their molecular beam epitaxy lab. We're ready to actually build the device that will prove our theories.
The part about getting the mass down to zero, how long is that going to take, you think?
If we had funding, we could produce the entire gravity drive system in probably 1 year or less, and we could certainly produce a small piece of the laser lens, a small piece of the hull.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go real slow here. Let's go real slow. So you're saying that you, in this book, you have the patents that would build a machine that could reduce the mass of an object down to close to zero?
Absolutely. Okay. That would really demonstrate to the physics
What sort of field do you generate to produce this effect?
We generate a non-abelian electromagnetic field using O3 rotation groups, considering Beltrami vector fields and non-abelian electrodynamics, because Maxwell's equations are incomplete.
Maxwell notwithstanding, I mean, how many Tesla coils do you use?
What?
How many Tesla coils do you use?
Actually, a lot of this research is based on Tesla's ideas of uniting a sonic oscillator with an electromagnetic field. He figured out many years ago it's possible to make electromagnetism and sound operate together as a three-part field, and that was his whole idea for projected power, for the infinitesimal current field generator, for action at a distance.
Yeah, scalar waves.
Without having dangerous microwaves being transmitted through the air.
Yeah, scalar waves.
We're using scalar waves and vector waves and tensor fields also.
Okay, so
it doesn't really have any precise orientation to it.
Can you explain to us? Well, hold on, Mike. Can you? Mike. Okay. Can you simply explain to us how your system would work to reduce the mass of an object or a person?
Yes, because gravity curves space-time in a certain direction. Let's call that positive curvature. Anti-gravity curves space-time in the reverse direction. We will produce a field that actually bends space-time in the reverse direction that mass does, flatten out the metric so the mass appears to disappear. It's still there, but it is not noticeable. And we're able to project a point of where the mass appears to be in front of the ship, to use it as a form of energy to actually help us propel ourselves forward.
Wait a second, hold on. Are you telling me that you reduce the weight of the ship and all the people inside, and you project some of this mass forward?
Absolutely.
Whoa! Hmm? That's some pretty way out wild stuff.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
When we project the mass forward, what it results in is carrying the entire spacecraft through the warp, and the magnetic endpoint is globally conserved, while the electric endpoint, the spaceship, is locally conserved. What this means in terms of the topology of the electromagnetic field is that we can locate the endpoint of our wormhole, if you wish to call it, at any point in any galaxy we wish to. Say we want to go to the star Vega, we just basically follow the photons right back to their source. It's very easy to go to.
Can you do that to an object? Mike, can you do that to an object that doesn't emit light?
You can do this to an object that doesn't emit light.
Yes, in other words, are you reliant upon following the photons of light back to your source coordinate for vectoring in a location that you're trying to get to? What if I want to get to some place?
What is basically the local fingerprint of the space-time curvature where we wish to do.
Okay, say I wanted to go to a place in space that. Mike, say I wanted to go to a place in space that had nothing there. Would that be possible to navigate to something like that?
Yes, by just putting no interference patterns on the hull and making it look like the void between the galaxies, where the expansion of the universe is accelerating faster and faster. We put that quantum information stored on the hull and in the beam. The whole thing can be likened to a giant computer that's giving the universe data that's saying that this vehicle belongs elsewhere other than where it is, because we're changing the probability wave function, the Schrodinger equation. We're changing the probability of where we are to being much more probable at our destination by use of the probability wave function, the energy and matter wave function, the basic Schrodinger equation.
Wow. Okay. Would this propulsion system also create, as a byproduct, some sort of over unity energy that you could use to power the whole thing?
In the sense that we're able to interact with the dark energy of the universe, this device can extract literally almost infinite amounts of energy from the quantum mechanical vacuum, because the vacuum has energy in it. The
vacuum flux field?
Mm-hmm. The vacuum has energy in it. We know this from the Aronoff-Bohm effect, from the Casimir effect, from the Lamb shift in hydrogen. We know there is energy in the vacuum. It's a non-zero energy.
Right.
This is what's driving the mysterious dark force. It's making the universe expand faster and faster and faster all the time. This has been directly observed by physicists, and it's just fascinating everyone. Why is the universe expanding faster?
Yeah.
Why isn't it slowing down?
That's the question.
Einstein's prediction of the force to counteract the force of gravity, because everything must balance. He thought it was a big mistake, his gravitational constant. It turns out to be the actual key not only to this universe, but to many other universes. And I could get into why nobody's figured out the unified field theory and what's going on.
But before we go cover that big enchilada, I want to focus a little bit more on this machine, this device that you have. How come Now, by the way, how long has your book been out?
This book is the latest in editions that we've been producing since 1981. This book has been out about 2 weeks.
Oh. What? So, the book's been out for 2 weeks. You said 1981. I'm confused.
Well, we've been producing in-house and physics reports and so forth for trying to generate funding for years, and we decided to just put it all in a book for general public consumption and interest.
All right. What I'm thinking is
away free to the planet. And
okay. My point for asking that is this: you have this remarkable these patents and these ideas. It would seem to me that any government in the world that has enough military might, enough intelligence, sophistication, and so on and so forth, would be knocking on your door because they would want this technology.
Well, they really don't know who we are because it has to do a lot with advertising and promotion. If people don't know who you are, then they're not going to come knocking on your door. That's why we're publishing the book. And
I see.
A lot of what we were doing was theoretical until just recently, when a lot of our theories have been proven to be correct by direct physical experiments, like the twin photon experiment, non-locality, and so forth. So now we are starting to get a little bit of attention, but hardly anybody knows who we are and what we're doing, because it's frankly expensive and hard to get this information out.
I know. You guys are cutting edge, and you guys are, controversial probably within the own community of the academia of physics, and
absolutely.
I think it's perfect.
Yes,
I think it's perfect that you're here. We could.
All the
hello. We could. I think it's. Hello, Mike.
People were.
Hello, Mike.
More interested.
Mike. I think it's great that you are on this program, because after all, here on this show, this is the perfect place for this kind of stuff. I mean, here we are. People have said, hello, Mike. Mike, still talking with the thing. Mike, hey, and people have said that this show is way ahead of its time. And when I hear you talking about these sort of things that could possibly revolutionize the world, not only transportation but free energy and traversing the galaxy, then I think that they very well might be onto something. Back to the program. Are you there?
Thank you, Rob. Yes, sir.
Excellent. I'm glad you were here. Just before the break, we were talking about the idea of, quantum mechanics and unified field theory. Mm-hmm. There's many governments, and our own government, of course, would be very interested in this knowledge. This knowledge that you speak of could completely revolutionize the whole transportation business. It could revolutionize and put out to make obsolete fossil fuel and natural gas. Now, right there, doesn't that give you some concern at all?
Well, yeah, we don't want to, stomp on the toes of everybody who's, making money off oil and all that type of stuff. What we want to do is slowly phase in alternate technologies as we run out of fuel on the planet. But we have the ability to extract energy directly from space-time via the Higgs mechanism. This is how the universe generates mass. The renormalization of the Yang-Mills theory by Tahoe, by introduction of the mass-generating Higgs term, basically proved the standard model of quantum physics, showing where does the mass of the universe come from. If you use an anti-Higgs field, you can do the absolute reverse and use it as a means of traveling from one point to another. Anti-Higgs field, exotic matter, anti-gravity goes backward in time. This vehicle is a time ship as well as a spaceship. It can supply enormous amounts of energy by having a confined flex tube of magnetic energy that is able to parameterize, organize the space-time vacuum only because we use a special three-part field that can exert a direct friction force or action on space-time itself and get into the underlying scalar energies and organize them and extract vast amounts of energy out of the vacuum, the so-called dark energy. What is it? Where does it come from? We're going to investigate it and use it. And this gets into the unified field theory of graviton drift from one universe to another.
Well, that's a pretty Mike. Hello, Mike. Mike, that's a pretty interesting idea right there. But I just want to point out that everything that people can see in space, with the naked eye, with a telescope, with the Hubble, everything that we know about, all the planets, all the galaxies, all the things that are out there only make up about 3% of all the matter that's in the universe.
Exactly.
We can't see most of what's really out there, and people got to realize that just as a starting point. And then most people will say, really? And then I would say, yeah, go look it up, it's all true. And they'd say, well, how come? What does that mean? What that means is there's this very large something out there with mass. It's called dark matter. And we can measure its effects. Yeah, we can measure its effects, but we can't see it. We don't have the ability to see it yet because we're not that far along in the evolutionary process of the civilization. As simple as that, right?
Yeah, but we've basically been able in the last few years to observe the effect of space in between the galaxies is expanding at a constant rate, but space inside of solar systems or inside of galaxies is not expanding. This is very, very, very mysterious. And as the gravity has a 1 over r squared field and the dark energy has field strength of 1, as the galaxies get further and further apart, they expand farther and farther away from one another, while the expansion force of the universe remains constant. It basically pushes everything apart because it's stronger than the force of gravity. Because this expansion force is constant over very, very large distances, whereas gravity decreases as the inverse square of the distance. So space is expanding in between the galaxies, but it's not expanding inside of the galaxies or inside of solar systems where there is a strong gravity field present. Okay. And this is a great mystery that we'd like to solve why this is. And we can do so by building this machine and doing experimental physics and saving hundreds of millions of dollars building big accelerators. Just build a simple device that can investigate the underlying structure of many aspects of quantum physics and gravity theory, and try to unify all these forces of nature and understand where the universe comes from and where it's going and what the ultimate fate is, and if there are other universes out there, possibly parallel universes according to certain physicists like David Deutsch, for instance.
Okay. Well, so let's go to a point in time where you have built this craft and people are getting inside, and I'm inside. My uncle's inside, and he brought his dog there with him, and we got a nice family from, say, Argentina in the back, and there's all sorts of folks in this thing. Okay. So now, you come out of the cockpit and you say, we're going to get ready to go on here. We're going to get ready to travel to, say, we're going to say, Madrid. What does it feel like if we are inside this craft and all of me, my uncle, and his dog, all of a sudden our mass is just dropped to near zero? What does it feel like? What's the experience like?
We are able to contain the mass effect inside the ship and maintain a mass of 1g, independent of any sort of inertial effects, acceleration or deceleration, and the effect of reducing the mass is only an effect that's outside of the ship itself, because we're affecting space outside the ship, not inside the ship.
Oh, so we don't feel anything?
You feel nothing. All of a sudden, you're looking out the ship, and the scene in front of you disappears, and your location appears instantaneously. It'd be like trying to look out the back of your head. There's nothingness for a brief flash, and then you're in Paris, or you're in Madrid, or you're 100 million light years away, or you're a million years in the past, or a billion years in the future.
Well, I might not know everything, but that sounds a heck of a lot better than British Rail.
Yes, indeed.
Well, this is an extraordinary sort of point here, because we're talking again about something that would just revolutionize the world. Let's go off on a slightly different subject. You mentioned unified field theory,
yes.
And you and I, in discussing this, I've told you that this idea, and I don't know how it happens. I mean, this show, we deal with everything on the show. This is a kind of alternative information show. It's a mainstream information show. It's a very serious, in-depth talk show. For some reason, I've gotten people on here that have many different ideas about unified field theory, but all of them can agree that matter and energy interacts with consciousness. And that's the one. That's one of the one big things. That's the one of the big things that has kept our scientists from realizing the unified field theory thus far. And even Einstein. This eluded Einstein as well, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Does God play dice with the universe or not? Does consciousness alter reality? Well, Einstein would be surprised to know that consciousness does alter reality. I'll describe in 30 seconds an experiment that was done using an atomic clock emitting beryllium atoms 1 per second to a decimal place of 19, or decimal places of accuracy.
Okay, wait, hold on. Slow it down, because this is a good theory. I'll give you 2 minutes on this. Go.
Right. Now, this is an experiment that has been repeated many hundreds of thousands of times. We have a device that's emitting 1 beryllium atom a second to a degree of accuracy of 1 part in a trillion or so. With nobody looking at this, it's 1 per second, but you get a couple of physicists in there observing the experiment.
Mike, slow down. It's like an atomic clock. These things are the most accurate clocks in the world.
Absolutely. This is an experiment that shows how consciousness slows down time.
All right. I'm talking about the clock now. So what we're saying is that we use atomic clocks. There's one in I think every country, and
like a cesium decay clock. Right?
Yeah, it's what all the clocks around the world are sort of based on. This atomic clock.
Very accurate.
So what they have is something that was like that had a very even decay rate.
Yeah, exactly. It's able to produce, a beryllium atom, let us say, very, very accurately as a source for doing an experiment where we know that there's no variation in the emission that can be caused other than some sort of mysterious interaction that's observer dependent. We live in an observer dependent relativistic universe.
Yeah. Okay. So the experiment was that this thing was going on very well. Of course, it would go on for 1,000 years. At the same
ever hear of the watched pot never boils? It's true. The more people that observe an event, the slower the event happens. It's been proven by this experiment. We slowed time down by focusing our attention on it. Now, we are massive beings, and we produce an electric field. Now, gravity slows down time, and as we know, if you're on the surface of a black hole, when a second goes by for you, millions of years go by in the outside universe. Now, what if we were able to analyze the strength of the gravity field at 1.5 volts, and it actually equals the output of the human brain at 1.5 volts. And we have these experiments that are altering the flow of time in the way that gravity does. It sort of shows how there's an interaction between electricity and gravity. Gravity is a very, very weak force, but if we can convert electricity into gravity, we can literally move mountains with 1.5 volts. The Earth's gravity field only amounts to the output of a single dry cell battery. The entire gravity field. That's how weak it is.
Yeah.
We already know that magnetism and gravity interact by satellites decaying in their orbit when they're using electromagnetic energy, and they have to be readjusted. This is the magnetogravitic interaction that was discovered after satellites were put into orbit. So we already know there's a connection there. So we want to carry it further and show how we can convert electromagnetism into gravity, and this helps to prove our unified field theory.
Yeah. Well, this idea of uncertainty that Heisenberg talked about is something that comes up a lot in quantum mechanics. The act of observing changes the experience in of itself.
Yes, it collapses the wave function. There is no photon, there is no wave. There is only a probability until we measure the light from the sun. We can use a grating and see a wave. We can use a silicon photocell and see a particle. We can't see both at once. Schrodinger proved basically there is no particle, there is no wave until we collapse the wave function by a precise measurement. So we change the nature of what we're going to see by the way that we wish to observe it. You've probably heard of the Schrodinger's cat experiment.
Yeah, the cat in the box. The poison.
Where they, should I go into that and describe it?
Yeah, let's,
your audience has sufficient headroom to know this already?
Yeah, everyone needs a little headroom. Yeah, go on with the cat in the box thing.
Yeah, well, this is a famous experiment where you lock a cat in a box with an atomic decay clock on there. That's eventually this atom is going to decay and emit a radioactive particle. But because of the uncertainty principle, we have no idea when this particle is going to decay. But when it does, it'll hit scintillation counter that'll release cyanide gas and kill the cat. But there is no way to know when this atom is going to decay because it's only one atom. It can decay in a second or it can take 1 billion years. So what's happening is until you observe what's going on in that box, you have no idea whether the cat is alive or not. So it exists in the superposition state of being both alive and dead at the same time.
Yes.
And that is very mysterious and very, very interesting, and the wave function is like that. These various quantum states that we observe are not what's really going on. They're what are the result of consciousness interacting with the universe. The rate of vibration of consciousness, the rate that we interact with the universe determines the flow of time, and it determines the extension of space. And furthermore, space and time themselves may be a function of the rate of observation.
Right. Yeah, both are true. I was just thinking, well, if you didn't feed the cat, I guess then...
Right. Once you see the cat, it's either going to be dead or alive. But if you can't see the cat, it remains unobservable.
No, it's
actually, one can say there's nothing in the box at all except a probability. Because remember, the Schrödinger wave equation is merely a probability that you'll have a particle, or a probability you'll have a wave. A probability you'll have a dead cat or an alive cat. And that's based on the quantum uncertainty principle of the decay of radioactive atoms.
Yeah, by the way, folks, don't try this at home. All right, well...
You're kind of wrong.
Well, we're talking about this weird world of the quantum. This is something that our current science can't marry. We can't have the same set of rules for that world as we do for the physics, the Newtonian physics, that rule the planets. We can't do it now. We don't have it. And you reckon you've got one?
Absolutely.
Right.
I can prove it by producing this device.
Yes.
We've already got quite a bit of mathematical evidence, but it's not sufficient yet to convince the physicists. I'm not primarily a mathematician. I'm an experimental physicist, and I wish to build a device to prove, my ninth order differentials are correct, and so forth and so on. I'm willing to share one of my master equations with your audience as an exclusive, so they can go out and experiment a little bit of their own.
Sure.
And find out what's going on.
This will be a headroom exclusive.
A headroom exclusive, absolutely.
Okay, what do you got?
Okay, you want to talk about this equation a little bit?
Sure, why not?
Okay, let me get out the piece of paper that has this on here.
Everybody get your pens and papers and
your
erasers.
Pens and papers out there. You need a little bit of max headroom for this here.
This is a pop quiz.
Yes, indeed. And is it soda pop? No, this is like serious pop. The equation is the number 137, which is your coupling constant ratio for all force-carrying particles, and also the age of the universe, 13.7 billion years. Now, this is multiplied by Planck's constant, the principle of action, over 4 pi, which basically means that 4 pi means going around a circle twice. The circle in our case is a Mobius strip. You go around as an electric particle once, and then flip over, and you go around as a magnetic particle. And then you come back to your rest state. This is called the O3 rotation group of electromagnetism, where we can consider the aspect of the photon, the electric and magnetic aspect, to be on two sides of a Mobius strip that's connected in a sixth space, proven by the Aronoff-Bohm effect. So we have 137 times Planck's constant over 4 pi, and this is over 2 times the mass and charge of the electron, because we have an electron that can have its north pole up, and we can have an electron with its south pole up. The two together form a Cooper pair, which is superconductive, and it's the key to our device. We use superconductive Cooper pairs. That is multiplied, still underneath the Planck's constant over 4 pi, by the vector product of the north and south magnetic monopoles, which is just 68.5 squared. All this is multiplied by the Fibonacci sequence. Now, the Fibonacci sequence and the golden mean, or the logarithmic spiral, are very important to understand in terms of consciousness in the universe. The universe operates with no beginning, no end, on the logarithmic spiral, shall we say. The Fibonacci sequence has a beginning, 0, 1, 3, 5, 8, 13, where each successive term is developed by adding the two previous terms together. The future is created by adding the present and the past together. So we we have the 137 and Fibonacci sequence in here, which has to do with the actual consciousness interaction of the universe itself. Now, the Fibonacci sequence is basically how life deals with something without a beginning or an end, because it approaches the golden mean of 6.1a within about 8 terms. Very, very fascinating, you know. So this Fibonacci sequence determines how plants grow and so forth, because if you follow the leaves coming out of a plant stem, when you get to the next leaf that comes out at the angle of the one previously down the stem, it's always a number in the Fibonacci sequence. The plant determines how to grow its next leaf by looking at the previous 2 that it grew. You know, very, very, very intelligent life is, and it approaches this logarithmic golden mean quite rapidly. So here we have an equation that deals with life and consciousness, and I forgot to say let me do this again because I forgot to put the speed of light in here on the top of the equation. So
don't forget that one.
Times Planck's constant over 4 pi times the speed of light sub L. Now the speed of light C relates to our laser beam, and the sub L is our laser beam that has 3 parts to it. You know, so there's like your complete equation. Now when people start digging into this, they'll get real excited because I've united the speed of light and quantum mechanics and electrodynamics and all that into a single equation that also determines how life responds to the natural geometry of the physical universe as observed.
Well, okay. And for those listening, I think we can put that on our website, and if you didn't,
let people play with this. This is just a part of the equation. People don't have to sign non-disclosure forms or whatever. This is enough to get people really interested in
it's a headroom
what
explosive.
we're doing here.
We'll put this.
I can give like some numbers. You know, we all know what the numbers for Planck's constant and 4 pi and all that is. You know. So
what's Planck's constant?
Well, I just use basically 6.22 times 10 to the minus 33, I believe is what it is.
Okay, see, I wouldn't have known that off the top of my head, and I dare say most people listening wouldn't have either.
Planck's constant is fascinating. It has to do with the principle of action. It basically says that the universe has to move around so that all the there's equal number of positive and negative particles in the universe. If they all got together at the same place at the same time, they'd annihilate, and the universe couldn't exist. So we say that the universe does everything with nothing. It's very Zen, because if everything were in the same place at the same time, it'd all cancel itself out. Now, it's really fascinating. It's the old theory, for every particle there is an anti-particle, so forth and so on, and we can show mathematically that 0 is the largest number in the universe, not the smallest.
And 1 is the lowest.
Basic errors in the entire theory of mathematics.
Yeah.
Why people haven't understood a lot of this. They're fairly reluctant, some of the physics community, because basically destroyed about a third of the science of mathematics and rewritten it, to explain what's actually going on from what we saw with the Hubble and the other incredible extensions of our senses, shall we say, so we can find out more what's going on in this mysterious, incredible universe.
All right. Well, hold it there.
All righty.
We're going to put that equation up out on robsimone.com for everybody listening. We're going to make that available for people to see, and experiment for yourself. Let me know how it works out for you. I'm sure there's a lot of people listening to the show that have a background in mathematics. I know the show appeals to so many different people, some of which are the academic type. Let me know what you think, because why not draw upon the resources of the show and all the listeners of Resonance FM, and let's see if you think it is indeed a unified field theory. Let's pull this one together, shall we, people? Welcome back to the Headroom. We're talking with Mike Miller, co-author of Laser Propulsion. Mike, we were just talking about this unified field theory, but I want to change tracks a bit because there's so much to get to.
Exactly, good idea.
Yeah, when we talked before, we were getting into some pretty interesting areas of of really some of the ancient civilizations.
Yes.
And their use of geometry. And the subsequent use of the same knowledge, some call it esoteric knowledge, in the use of, say, the cathedrals of Europe.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, some of the Masonic knowledge, say, as an example, the King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid is such that if you use a sound frequency of 2 cycles per second times 10.5 cycles per second, you set up a resonant heterodyne frequency that produces a delta wave and an alpha wave in the brain and a third wave, which is the resultant of the two, and it allows for, theoretically, for the person to experience, like in states of deep meditation, an out-of-body experience, which would be necessary if you're in the Egyptian civilization and wanted to follow the shaft of Re back up to Osiris and Isis, and have your soul saved or whatever, and it's the resonance of interior spaces and the uniting of electromagnetism and sound that, again, is the key to all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I could describe why the pyramids have 4 sides, and one's red, one's blue, one's green, and one's white. We use emeralds, rubies, sapphires, and diamonds. That's the staff of Re, the diamond scepter, all this type of stuff. Now, if you have red, blue, and green, and you rotate it as in a color wheel, you have white light. If you take red, blue, and green paint and just throw it down on a white canvas, it produces black. The difference between the two is Planck's constant, the principle of action. Or in terms of philosophy, we could say the difference between life and death is this principle of action. And again, we have the 3-part field, red, blue, and green, which can combine in all the colors of the spectrum and produce white light.
Okay. And you talked about these emeralds and these rubies, and isn't it funny to point out that these are the same stones, the gems that they use, these lasers?
Exactly. Very brilliant. That's exactly the conclusion I wanted you to come to. That's very, very intelligent. The first laser was a ruby rod and the chromium ions in it, or what give it its red color and allow for the lasing effect to take place. And what we do with 3 different laser beams is we have 3 different quantum numbers or degrees of freedom that are on it, involving charge, electric charge, and magnetic charge. And we're able to have these interact in a vortex and produce a fourth condition, which is at 90 degrees to X, Y, and Z simultaneously, the fourth geometric dimension. We're not talking about time as the fourth dimension. We're talking about hyperspace, the geometric fourth dimension. We consider time to be a zero-order field because you can't have instantaneous 1, 2, and 3-dimensional phenomena. So time is not the fourth dimension. It's a zeroth-order dimensional field.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and we are looking back at these ancient civilizations. How did they have this knowledge? How did they come to understand these things?
Well, I have certain privileged information from the Egyptian civilization. They had contact with a certain race of beings that they thought were gods, but we believe they were actually extraterrestrials. And the hidden knowledge was the Egyptians were able to contact these beings through the use of certain, shall we say, telepathic initiators. They smoked the beetle wing of a precise scarab beetle, and it produces a telepathic interaction with a species that is basically insectoid in nature that has been in the galaxy for around 400 million years, according to the old information. So the same group that the Aztecs were in contact with, and so forth and so on. The critters have been seen over Mexico City, these lights, spaceships, whatever they are. We don't really know exactly what's going on, but we're sure interested in contacting and finding out. And this equation that I've given away is something that I developed when I was just fortunate enough to see what I believe to be an actual spaceship in 1976, myself and 8 other people. And being a physicist, I was able to figure out how this thing worked and, develop equations so that one could basically use an ordinary flashlight to flash some of the numbers that are found in this equation to see if maybe these beings would come back, down and out of the stars or whatever. And we did this, and it actually happened. But it's very strange the way that it happened. Developed the equations from 1976 to 1981, and went hiking up a very tall mountain in the beautiful state of Oregon, Pacific Northwest out here where I live, and we saw a few funny lights in the sky, myself and 3 other friends, including the guy who became, my engineer partner, Larry, and they said, Miller, why don't you use this equation you've been developing? Those things look like that so-called spaceship you saw, he said, and you discovered, out floating in the sky. Everybody's real skeptical, and including me. No. So I decided to flash the equation at him, and what I did is I went 1 flash, 2 flashes, 3 flashes, all the way up to 9 to let them know that what our base number was, and then started going 137 times 6.28, over 2e, and so forth and so on. What I just described to you, and, well, these spaceships came down and demonstrated their technology for us. In other words, they sent down green beams of what we call electromagnetism squared, as elucidated by analysis of the Aronoff-Bohm effect, tubes of green force down which small unmanned machines would be popping up and down. And one came up within, a few feet of us at a rate of velocity of thousands of miles an hour from a dead stop, producing no shock wave, no rush of air or anything, obviously out of phase, using this massless field that I'm talking about, making no more disturbance than a photon, drifting and floating like a leaf on the Earth's magnetic field due to the Meissner effect. Superconductivity. Once again, proving my theory. This thing turned off its white light when it stopped and showed its 3-part red, blue, and green lens again, with demonstrating my theory was correct. And it was just like, whoa, very, very shocking.
That's some validation.
To start talking.
Yeah, that's some validation there.
Is the most important thing for a scientist to have, and once your credibility is shattered, boy, it's hard to get it back. This is reality. Put me on the lie detectors, whatever, and we know this thing works because we've seen it quite a few times since then, and it's always the same thing. Okay, smart ape down there, if you can produce these devices and some sort of working hyperdrive, then maybe we'll get in contact with you.
That's the thinking anyway.
We're not working with the aliens. There's no big heavy-duty thing going on like that, but we have seen them, and they return and use this equation. It's been going on for many years, and that's why we're so adamant about developing this technology, and why it's so hard for the scientific community to understand, because it's way ahead, and you need max headroom to understand this.
Well, you mentioned Egypt and the beetle, these scarabs, these beetles, because we always see this in the hieroglyphics, these beetles, right, these scarabs.
Absolutely. It's a telepathic initiator. Remember, scarab beetles are dung beetles that feed on serotonin, which, of course, is a neurotransmitter. Is the key right there. So whatever is being produced in these beetles does something to the human mind where we're able to telepathically send out a wave that is, shall we say, not polluted with the inner dialogue, which acts as an offensive mental odor to telepathic beings as far as we're concerned. And we're able to basically send out an energy that is picked up by these beings because they are evolved insects, and they are telepathic. The critters in the large black and white triangular ships.
Well, would they ingest these beetles?
Absolutely not, no. They would smoke them through a water pipe to filter out any cyanide that might be present. And again, I caution people not to experiment with this, especially species, Chrysoderma and so forth and so on. Be very, very careful. This is primary research, and this is like a gift of knowledge that I've been able to figure out that was lost for thousands of years, basically because I was trading information to esoteric group in the northern Mexico that had this knowledge, and they eventually gave the knowledge to me because they were interested in my physics theory and said, hey, well, this is what you do, and I did it, and by golly, the spacecraft appeared a few days later. Now, this is the second group of UFO beings or whatever that we have contacted. The first group that came down in the large ships that we have in this laser propulsion book, it's reverse engineered technology. Basically, we've seen it, and it agrees with our theory. Let's just produce it here on the planet. The ones the Egyptians were in contact with is a different group. They may be have been in contact with both groups. We do know where they're from, how long they've been in the galaxy, what they look like, et cetera, et cetera. We don't know their psychology or what's going on in the greater galaxy at large.
Okay, well let's explore this a tiny bit. So you've actually tried smoking this beetle in a bong.
Oh, yeah, it had no hallucinogenic or any kind of a drug effect that I could find from it, but I was able to produce, just a strong mental image of my mathematics and project it out in space while I'm using the equations that we use to attract the other beings when we're up at Mount Jefferson, and the black triangular spaceship came down out of the sky.
And this was a special kind of beetle. We don't want to give out what kind of beetle it was.
I'll just say it's one of the scarab beetles.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe you can get them in Lambert's. I don't know, but let me ask you this: if you were now, this is just hypothetically, if you were to smoke, say, other insects, would that bring upon contact with different alien insectoids?
This is extremely dangerous territory what we're talking about here. A lot of these insects contain toxins or unknown compounds. Now, a lot of them contain cyanide.
This is just completely hypothetical.
What we're particularly interested in is a group of iridescent beetles that some of them feed on wood. I've identified in the United States 82 species so far that actually do contain similar compounds through chromatographic analysis. I'm also a chemist. Now, you got to be very careful. Just one inhalation of this substance is enough to produce the telepathic initiation. Now, what you do at that point is get the equations out and flashlights and start just projecting mental energy, because these beings are telepathic.
Okay.
That is the important thing.
I guess, so it's just exclusive to this one particular kind of beetle that produces this telepathic initiation.
Yeah, but actually there's a whole bunch of them that have similar compounds in them. I haven't experimented with them per se, but they might have a similar effect. Who knows?
How do you think these ancient Egyptians knew in the first place to, toke on a bug, as they say?
Yeah, exactly.
How do you think they figured it out?
I don't know how they figured it out. It's very mysterious.
Maybe they were in contact with some
possible that consider this scenario. Maybe these creatures have been interested in our development for a long time, and they came down to the Egyptians and just basically, okay, if you guys want to get in touch with us again, here's the radio to get in touch with us. You just smoke a little bit of this beetle ring, and then we'll know you want to get in touch with us, and boom, we'll come on back down. Yeah. And that seems to be the way it works.
Right.
You want to be working with the blue-black carapaces and be careful with some of the other iridescent ones. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, it's open to speculation.
It's totally open.
And that's just one civilization. I mean, what about ancient Sumeria? They didn't have anything like that in their mythology, in their folklore, in their history, but they are also clearly in touch with somebody. I mean, they charted the solar system.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about this. And then the Dogon people in Africa that knew all about Sirius B hundreds of years before it was discovered. And these creatures are from Sirius B that I'm talking about, the ones in the black triangular ships. I mean, that's what they told me. I don't know if they're lying or what, Why would they lie, That wouldn't make any sense,
It's hard to say. It really is, it's hard to say. Well, do you think that these craft, that these visitors, what sort of intent do they have? Are they responsible for seeding life on this planet?
This I do not know. I can tell you this, the reptilian civilization that we got in touch with, that we patent our device on. Now, we've actually had a couple of times where the critters have actually floated out through the solid wall of their little small scout ship on a beam of this green electromagnetism squared energy, and they had like face-to-face meetings that lasted like 30 to 40 seconds, and a lot of information was passed back and forth very, very rapidly, and I might describe these creatures. I mean, they're not like what you see in the books or on TV. Like,
it's amazing.
Covered with scales.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Eyes that are like vertical almonds, no iris, no pupil, emitting glowing yellow light, without any reflection, and they're very, very unique. Yeah. With crocodile snouts and sharp teeth. The They're quite interesting creatures. We've seen them on a couple of occasions. Myself and numerous witnesses, because I always want to do this stuff with witnesses present, so there's no chance that I may be, self-deluded or misinterpreting data or whatever.
Of course, yeah. It's amazing how much information...
Careful about the credibility angle when we're talking about this.
Yeah. It's amazing how much information you can exchange when you do away with the polite pleasantries. You were communicating in using telepathy.
In
solely.
pure mathematical terms, pretty much.
Uh-huh.
Images would form in my mind, their mathematics and machinery and so forth, and I would try to project images of what we're trying to do here on the planet and the problems that we're having with disease and, overpopulation and so forth, and basically given the telepathic information that, hey, Miller, why don't you use this device to cure disease? You can frequency target using the sound wave and light wave together, like taking an MRI picture of someone and then having the sound field go in there where we saw the tumors and destroy it, because the light field can't do any work, but the sound field can. And say, oh, right, very, very, very good. So now we have a device that, do you want to destroy all the prions, the preons in meat? We know how to do it by frequency targeting them and destroying them and get rid of mad cow disease.
All right, I want to talk about this device and also the nature of light, but we just got to take a pause for the cause here.
Welcome back.
Hey, welcome back indeed. I want to talk about the nature of light.
Oh, I'd love to talk about the nature of light.
Me too, and I want to talk about this healing machine as well. You want to just finish up with this healing machine thing?
What's that?
You want to just finish up with this healing machine device?
Sure. Basically, it's like we're working with the simple principle of resonance. As an example, you might have 3 or 4 wine glasses set up on a shelf. Each one has a different amount of liquid in it, and a famous opera singer is in there hitting high C, and one of the glasses explodes because it actually resonates with that high C because it rings with the same tone because it has the same right amount of liquid in it, while the other glasses do nothing. Now, it turns out that if you have cancer cells and normal cells, and say like in the same petri dish, and you're using experiment with this device, you can actually determine the frequencies that the cancer cells respond to that ordinary cells won't. They will glow a certain frequency under the interaction of several beams of laser light, and when you find out what that frequency is, you basically use the same frequency to shatter the tumor cells without harming any of the live tissue. And this stuff was done at, I think, Johns Hopkins or some places in Scientific American a few years ago. So this is like not any kind of theory or wild speculation. Frequency targeting is already being worked on. Royal Rife started working on this many years ago. The basic idea is the uniqueness principle. If you can differentiate one object from another, you can find a resonant frequency that will disrupt it and nothing else. Like your household microwave oven, where you can put your food in there on a plate, say, and then have another plate in your microwave. Is this experiment? Your food heats up, but the plate doesn't, because it's frequency targeting the water molecules in the food and heating that up while the other plate remains stone cold. Now, readjust the magnetron in your microwave, and then the empty plate will get real hot, but the food will remain cold. It's all a matter of adjusting it. And this
targeting
device will do the same thing to any kind of disease. You want to get rid of AIDS, for instance? We can actually destroy viruses inside of cells without harming the cells that the viruses are inside of.
Yep. This is all true. I mean, this is not science fiction whatsoever. People's organs, people's heads, even people who get their ham radio license have to know what frequency, say, the human head resonates at. Because if you're broadcasting on that same frequency, it's particularly dangerous.
Oh, yeah. That's why 60-cycle current is not really good, because the alpha frequency is 10.5, and you multiply that out, it doesn't equal 60 cycles per second. So that's why certain people are bothered by, 60-cycle alternating current. Why it would be better to have it maybe as a function of the delta or eta or theta waves of the human brain. But, of course, the military has been working on this with psionic weaponry to produce states of relaxation in crowd, or states of excitement or whatever, by just stimulating certain brain waves. If you broadcast a field of 10.5 cycles per second, electromagnetic field over a crowd, everybody will get real nice and mellow, for instance. You do that with 2 cycles per second, they'll fall into a deep sleep, pass out.
Well, they used this technology during the First Gulf War. They have a device that induces fear.
Oh,
That's why some of these
frequencies. That's absolutely true.
Yeah, so that's why some of these hardened Republican guards were surrendering to camera crews from CNN.
Yeah. It wasn't the horrible heavy metal music they were playing. It was like this psionic ray that actually affects human brainwaves and creates. You can create people that produce hallucinations, produce fear, produce gladness, ecstasy, whatever you want by frequency targeting certain areas of the brain that operate on precise frequencies and produce specific effects.
Yeah, you know what? I think the Grateful Dead uses that because I'm serious. Because if you go to
excuse my laughing. I'm a great friend of the Grateful Dead and Keezy's and stuff. I like their music. Used to hang out with them.
Right on.
Musicians.
Well, if you go to a Dead show now, they're now called the Dead. They've got this really wild light show, and it produces an effect that's similar to some of the deleterious effects of different chemicals. So you
absolutely. For instance, you can't have lights flashing at a certain frequency without anyone who's an epileptic immediately going into a seizure. So we're real careful when we're using different types of flashing lights and stuff not to use those frequencies, which will make epileptics go into immediate seizures.
Right.
You know, and it's like
how about that? How about
people
that?
Are being irritated by a lot of the
Mike. How about that cartoon that was throwing kids into seizures in Japan?
What?
Sure.
Really?
Yeah, you don't remember that?
I don't know everything, but
there's this cartoon in Japan. It was very flashy, and some kids were just having seizures.
Wow, they're using the wrong frequencies. They don't understand their physics.
Yeah, it's true.
Very, very, very careful. That exactly proves my point. I hadn't even heard of that.
Yeah, in fact, that was parodied on a Simpsons episode.
Oh.
They take a trip to Japan. They turn on the TV in the hotel, and their pupils dilate. They all start just twitching on the floor.
Well, it's like, the old shamanistic thing, like the old shamans used to induce a natural state of consciousness expansion by using 2 cycles per second, which is delta, times 10.5 cycles per second, which is the alpha wave of the brain. The alpha is like the state when you get into good Tibetan meditation, in a nice relaxed, open state, and then the delta state is associated with out-of-body experiences and so forth and so on. So you combine them together and you can have a natural, drug-free, incredible experience of heightened awareness.
Mm-hmm.
That's without the use of any chemicals or weirdness at all,
Yeah, no weirdness. We're anti-weirdness on this show.
Anti-weirdness. We want to get rid of the weirdness thing and get into the fascinating amazingness of it all, and the madness in the
we're pro-realness. It's funny, but the military, they've been tinkering around with this stuff for a long time. They know about all this stuff.
Oh, of course.
The CIA and all that stuff.
They know about this technology, but, they have their own in-house people working on it and stuff, and we're just little players in the game, and, they got all their things they're working on, and we don't have very much money to do our stuff, so we're just kind of dinking around trying to publish series to generate funding to build our device,
Yeah. Let's talk about the nature of light, because it's really extraordinary. Light and gravity, these are the things that really affect people's lives. They don't know it, but we're going to explain to them why it does. People say, well, okay, what's the deal with light? Is it a particle or is it a wave? It seems to exhibit properties of both.
Yes, it depends on how you measure it. Schrodinger basically showed that light is just a probability wave function that exists as a superposition of being both a particle and a wave until we actually measure the light. We can use a diffraction grating, which produces rainbow effects and so forth, and you hold it up to the sunlight, which is like a wave phenomena, or we can use an ordinary silicon solar cell. It's like in your sun-powered calculator, and it just catches individual photons. This is how they prove the quantization of light, by the way, was just like a silicon photocell absorbing, like, the photoelectric effect. Light comes in, one photon produces one electron, so we know that there's photons. So we have this dual nature of light. And now we want to get into the stuff that's more interesting than that even. We can consider light to be made of, as in Feynman and Wheeler's theory, of an electron traveling forward in time and an anti-electron or positron traveling backward in time. And what this does is the forward arrow of time and the backward arrow of time cancel, and the photon does not experience the passage of time. Therefore, one photon can go from you to me across this electromagnetic wave, or it can go to 2 stars or 3 stars, or it can go to every point in the universe simultaneously. As far as a photon is concerned, it's everywhere at once simultaneously, which means that space and time do not exist as far as a photon is concerned. And indeed, I wish to go on further to prove that space and time are a function of consciousness. Now, if you're traveling at lower than the speed of light, then you experience the passage of time and you notice the extension of space. We're vibrating at 8 miles per second, so the universe seems to be full of space and time. But if you're moving at light speed, you can go to every point in the universe instantaneously. You know, it's very, very, very interesting. So we can get into a little more of the mysteriousness of light, talking about non-locality and Bell's theorem, if I'm not going too fast here.
No, Bell's theorem, it's fascinating. I love that. Yeah.
Well, let's say we have a single photon. Let's just call it Mona Lisa. And we're able to use a certain crystal that splits it into 2 photons. And now we have Mona and her sister Lisa. And they were originally Mona Lisa. Now we split this up into 2 photons, and each one has half the frequency of the other. So we have a blue photon. We split it up into 2 red ones, and these are sisters, Mona and Lisa. Now, if we separate these 2 photons by 10 or 12 feet and apply a magnetic field to Mona, then it changes the projection of the electric field vector E in the photon of Mona, and Lisa, the field vector, changes instantaneously. Now, I'll go through this a little simply. When you change anything on one of these photons, the other photon knows about it instantaneously and changes. And you can separate Mona and Lisa by billions of light years. And when you change anything in Lisa, Mona knows about it instantaneously, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So this is quantum connectivity to a higher dimension at an infinite rate of velocity.
Yeah, this is Bell's theorem. In other words, this information is transmitted somehow instantaneously, going billions of times faster than the speed of light, not even bound by any, sort of appreciable laws of physics.
Precisely, and it may indicate that the space and time are an illusion, and we may be living in a 2-dimensional universe. And the 3rd dimension, as the pointing vector, is the vector product of the electric and magnetic components of the photon, producing the illusion of 3 space. It may actually be a physical reality, and that the 3rd dimension may be a function of consciousness or a function of some interaction, and we may be living on 2-dimensional membranes.
Well, is this reality that...
No, but we can do experiments to find out with this machine.
Well, is this reality that we're all living in? Is it possible that it's just as a holographic computer program?
Absolutely.
Oh, dear.
This could totally be like a holographic interference pattern.
Oh, my. Well, then that's... Because that's something that comes up a lot at these... these whole life, these consciousness life expos, and these people discussing the nature of reality.
Look at it this way. If you break up a hologram into 1 million pieces, each piece of the hologram contains all the information in the entire hologram, but from that point of view. Now, like you and me, we can see all of the universe, but only from our own local point of view. But we can change our local point of view. You can have observers anywhere in the universe, and each one can theoretically see the entire universe, but only from their point of view.
Yeah, David... Peter Gersten used to talk about this.
Yes, exactly.
My old pal out in Sedona, he used to say that our reality is infected with a virus.
Interesting way to put that.
And I think he was referring to perhaps the things that don't seem to fit, maybe this UFO stuff, maybe the cracks in our realities, the things that people experience that they can't put a finger on,
right.
Maybe the thing that people assign to religion or God or a religious experience. Maybe these things are just these viruses in this program they're all experiencing. And the question is, if it's true, then who's running the program? Who wrote the program?
Exactly. Is the universe itself intelligent, and all the observational data of all the observers contributes to the overall intelligence of the quantum strings? Is there a higher deity behind all this, a supposed God or underlying spirit? It'd be really nice to investigate such phenomena, and we may be able to do this by producing a hyperwave radio. We're able to, with this device also, we're able to pick up signals that travel faster faster than light. Because, I mean, any advanced civilization is not going to be using radio waves that travel at light speed. Now, my theory, with traveling faster than light and telepathy and global conservation of magnetic energy is basically this. A moving electric particle emits an electromagnetic wave which acts at a distance through space. A moving magnetic particle, magnetic monopole, produces a wave that acts at a distance through time. This is your telepathic field. It's instantaneous over any distance, including the width of the universe. This is your, the globally conserved topological property of the, magnetic component of the U1 gauge field of electromagnetism.
Well, yes.
Yeah, that might be a little deep, and I'm just trying to give a little theoretical verification to all the PhDs that might be listening in here.
Yeah, we got to give out, shout-outs to the PhDs that might be listening.
Oh, man, I'm working on the shoulders of giants, working with Einstein's equations and Schwinger and Wheeler and DeWitt and Witten and all, and de Hooft, who renormalized the Yang-Mills theory and came up with a mass-generating Higgs mechanism. Yeah, give credit where credit's due, and we work with this knowledge and take it a step further and produce a device that can carry us to the stars.
Yep, absolutely. It's funny that I think we were talking off air last week about the notion of some craft coming towards this planet, and if it was using some sort of conventional propulsion, it would give off such enormous radio noise we'd see it coming from a million miles away.
Yeah, but the radio noise, of course, propagates at the speed of light, just like a gravity wave propagates at the speed of light. It makes ripples in space-time. That's why one can unite electromagnetism and gravity. So if any kind of vehicle or whatever is using any kind of gravitic or electromagnetic gravitic propulsion system, be sending out waves, and if it's kind of slows down, let us say, then those waves would propagate past its location further and might be detectable, let us say.
Do you think that this whole SETI program, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence using these big radio telescopes, is a waste of time?
Not a waste of time, because no intelligent civilization communicates with radio waves, because radio waves can't travel faster than light.
Yep. They're traveling at the speed of light. It is true. What is a good way to sort of, for people if they're...
Well, if you take, you leave Mona here on the Earth and take Lisa on your spaceship and take this twin photon a billion light years away, then when you're talking in the microphone to Mona, then Lisa, who's in the spaceship, you can hear the person talking instantaneously, even though it's a billion light years away. We already know that we can send information along a laser beam that's faster than light. They've been doing that at MIT for quite a while, and they've even transmitted the matter field of an electron out there, supposedly faster than light, although we're really not sure about the interpretations of some of these experiments. But we do know that information can be propagated at an infinite rate of velocity. This is how the gauge field coordinates isospin in the universe, where neutrons and protons are going flip-flop in resonance everywhere in the universe at once. What coordinates this? What coordinates the Ligand fields that tell all quartz crystals to have six-sided symmetry everywhere in the universe? And again, what is the velocity of luck, such that when you flip a coin, it's always 50% heads, 50% tails, no matter where you are in the universe? What is the speed of probability, the velocity of luck? Well, if you're in a heavy gravity field, you can't flip a coin, so it will always be heads, always be tails. You can control probability by gravity, once again, which is mass, which is an observer, which is consciousness. Some people are luckier than others. Why?
Why, yeah.
How do they influence events? What's going on here? We wish to investigate such phenomena and get at the roots of such things. Whether it's magnetoelectricism or electromagnetism. We want to get into the full gauge group, which is not we'd say U1, it's U1 squared, electromagnetism squared, and this is your six-dimensional phase space that the Aronoff-Bohm effect proved. And all this verification experimental stuff is in our book. All the information from the beginnings of physics until now that proves what we're talking about this communication at a distance. Now, what we propose to do is not just send signals faster than light, but send mass faster than light by reducing mass to the weight of the signal, 0.
Okay.
And so we can send it because it has no mass. We don't have to worry about any of them exceeding the speed of light, because we know that space can move faster than the speed of light. It's all in Einstein's equations. The velocity of space itself, the metric g mu nu, can be infinite.
You have a picture of the lifter here, a demonstration of the Biefeld-Brown effect.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that's quite extraordinary that people I've seen done right in front. It's basically 1, 2, 3, 4 triangles of just very light wood and aluminum foil, and you generate high voltage through it.
Well, yeah, the basic idea of this is it relates to we call the whole theory of metals, electrons and the absence of electrons. This is also a particle known as the exciton, an electron and a hole joined together. The basic idea is the electron wants to always find the hole. So if you have a field circulating around your little vehicle with electrons chasing holes all the time, then you can produce a unidirectional flow of energy.
Right, and this thing just lifts off the ground.
Yeah, I mean, we don't use any kind of primitive device like that, but it's just like a little verification of some of the effects that we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, what's really interesting about what we're doing with electrons and holes is that the electron has a fixed weight and a fixed charge. Now, your hole can have any mass, up to millions and millions of tons. So if the hole, the positive charge, is much more massive than the negative charge, and the negative charge is going to be attracted to the positive charge, and that's why the electron goes around the proton in the atom, because the proton weighs 1,800 times more than the electron, and it's the positive charge. We're just using the existing way the universe works to produce a similar effect. We have a massive positive charged body in front of us, and our spaceship, which is lightweight and negatively electrically charged, and we're attracted to the much larger charge, the same way that the proton and electron and hydrogen are bound together.
Yep. Your book points out and demonstrates and gives details about the patents that you have been awarded in the United States, Japan, Western Europe, and the UK. Laser propulsion designed was deemed feasible. And this is something that you are working very hard. The book is called Laser Propulsion. And Mike Miller, thanks so much for coming on. Where can people go to find your book if they're interested in taking a look at it?
All right, what we have is a website that's called UnitelAerospace.com, and this is spelled UNITEL. Then we have a dash, and then aerospace, which is spelled normal way, AEROSPACE, aerospace, and .com.
Yes.
That's our basic website where there's information on the book and so forth. And there's also, we've got a toll-free number, which is international, where you can call up and just order the book directly.
Okay.
Give that out over the air here.
Sure.
This is, our publisher, David Carter, the reason why he's doing this himself is because he's one of the people that has seen UFOs. I take people up in the mountains and bring the ships down, so... I
have your number here. It's 1-866-889-4879. That's 1-866-889-4879.
Exactly.
That's it. That's on the laser propulsion by Unitel, and I take it Unitel is the name of your organization there. Basically, working on my most independent thing now. I've no longer working as a corporate officer and doing the business aspects. I'm just concentrating completely on the science aspects now, because I can't be both a businessman and a scientist at the same time. There's just too much. So we have other people working on that with the corporation out there, and I'm doing my independent research, and we've got our patents working on all this together. And I might mention that our next book that's coming out here, we're going to give a lot of primary information on the story of Michael and Larry and Unitel and how all this came about. And it's just absolutely an incredible story, and we put in information so people can go out and contact these beings themselves and experience what we've experienced.
audience. Now, this will be called Flying Colors. It should be out in about 9 months.
Okay, we're going to tell people about that when you come on. We hope that when it comes out that you'll come back on and we can continue this dialogue.
Oh, I would just appreciate it so much. I mean,
yeah, definitely.
It's a wonderful opportunity. I'm having a great time. I hope your audience is too.
Absolutely, I'm sure they are. The Headroom audience is the best audience for any radio show, that's for sure. Mike Miller, thanks so much for joining us here in the Headroom. We look forward to talking to you real soon. We look forward to getting updates because I know things are happening all the time. When we come back next time, we're going to talk about how people themselves can contact these ETs in which you spoke of.
Exactly. We would love to have the audio radiance for your radio audience provide the key for interacting with infinity for free.
Well, I couldn't have said that better myself. Thanks very much, Mike.
Thank you, Rob. This has been a wonderful opportunity. I've been looking forward to doing this show for years, and I appreciate it very much. Thank you very much.